I'm
All
looking
right.
at the names yet to unclap. Okay. Oh, God, I started speaking. So let's look at that.
No,
Sir
I mean,
Kenneth, good to have you.
thank you. Thank you so
Our
much.
diaspora member. How are you doing, sir?
I'm
I'm so
fine, thank
sorry. My camera will come on much later, right? I just want to safely arrive at where I'm headed, right? My camera will come up much later. Thank you for coming. Thank you so much. Thank you for always obliging us when I think we've called you like 4 times now since you were a member in Diamond. Thank you for always showing up and giving us just a bit of your career journey. Thank you, sir. You have the floor.
Thank you so much, Felicia. And thank you everyone for joining. It's a privilege to be here. Thank you for the hype, Felicia. I appreciate it. At the same time, I'm a growing professional like everyone else on the call, and I trust that I'll be able to share a few things that will help us in our careers on wherever we find ourselves already. So I have just 15 minutes. I'm just going to run through a little bit of my story, draw a few lessons, and then wrap up with core lessons from my career that may be relevant to the topic of conversation today. This is a little bit about me. I will not dwell on it, but I'm sure in the recording you'll be able to pause it and see a little more and then link up on LinkedIn if I may make an impression on you. Okay, this is my story, and I'm diving into it. I'm not going to define career growth or any of those preambles. I'm just going to tell you a bit of my story, and then we draw lessons from it, and we'll be able to go from there. I have been involved in about 5 main areas of technology, what do you call it? Technology and, will I say, semi-technology roles, from wireless networking to service management to application support to database administration, and currently an enterprise architect based on that experience and other learnings. So I'm going to break my presentation down through these 5 areas and pick out how transitioning was for me, as well as some key elements that are typical of anyone who is growing in their career in any direction. Okay, my wireless network journey started when I did an IT industrial training in my year 4. That was about 2003. And then I had, if you look at the middle of my slide, I had a choice to make. A lot of people, when they hear the word IT, they ask themselves, do I go for the money or do I go for the learning? And that is a question that we have to answer if we are starting our careers or if we are moving into new spaces. You see, when you're moving into a new space or you're starting a new career, you may need to sacrifice the money that you would have earned for the experience that you need to launch yourself in that career. So we all had to make that choice in IT. I'm sure you probably did. And I'm telling you that if you're transitioning to a technology, you may also have to make that choice, the choice between the experience you want to gain in a place or the money. So a lot of people in my time, they would probably choose an oil company for as an IT, a company. When I say IT, industrial training, but some of us chose companies that were small enough to allow us to make mistakes, small enough to allow us to get involved and learn. So we had to make that choice. And that was about 2003. And I started learning a lot about wireless networking, Novell Network, a little bit of a Cisco router. There's a funny story about that one. I once exchanged erase flash or erase config with erase flash in a Cisco 1900 router. And if you are a networking person, you probably know the implications of that. I basically wiped out the ROM, the memory, the random access memory, which stores the operating system as part of an experiment, so to speak. So those errors are there. So that environment was small enough for me to learn, in the early days of my career. I got exposure to a lot of other things like Exchange, Active Directory. Once my boss asked me, look, take this bunch of servers, create an AD, a domain, build an Exchange, and I managed to do it. At least I could send mails out. I couldn't receive mails, but I could send mails out. So that was another story altogether. So some of the fun memories there were, because of the nature of the place, I could try my hands on computer monitors, open up the circuit, learn a few things about the discrete components. I had to do installations of radios and antennas because it was an ISP basically. And one of my highest climbs was 120 feet without a safety belt. And eventually, when I graduated, I still went back to the same company, or rather the same man. His name is Agim Ikwen, and he really helped me get in the fundamentals of my career at that time. And he took me to Abuja, from Abuja to Lagos. And in Lagos, I had to start a brand new ISP. All he would do would be, he would tell me, this is the task, this is the documentation, this is the equipment, continue. That's what he would give to me. And using that method, I did the exchange. I set up some novel netware server client system elementary, and eventually set up the ISP in Ikeja. And that was simply because somebody gave me an opportunity, and that the environment was good enough to allow me to learn in that environment, you see. And that's some of the learnings from that career growth. So there were other experiences which you could think about as negative. I've talked about the erase flash experience. Once I fell through a roof. We had to do a lot of climbing. Once I fell through a one-story roof, it wasn't too long, and I broke my left wrist in that venture. Once I dropped an antenna from 60 feet. I was tired and I was trying to move it about, install it, and then it just fell from me. But at that time, it was about 60,000 naira. That was 2003 thereabout. So working in tech means you must get involved and be enthusiastic enough to get your hands dirty. Sometimes there are accidents, but these accidents are vital lessons of your career. Those mistakes, those accidents, those experiences to learn are vital aspects. Tech, when it comes to tech, you learn more by doing that often than you learn by attending training. So that was the beginning of my career. I got an opportunity to get into Airtel through a contract. One of the days when I was coming back from somewhere, I was doing some ad hoc job. If a friend of mine asked me for my CV, a former colleague in my school asked me for my CV, I gave it to her on Friday. By Monday, they had called me for an interview. And incidentally, within the same period, I was going through the set of interviews for Nigeria NLNG. Some of those big companies, they have like maybe 7 steps to join a company. So I was, close to one of the steps. I was close, but then I got this opportunity to be a contract staff with Airtel. And that is how I went into service management. I was employed in the service desk. And I started getting exposed to things like ITIL. I got my certification much later, 2 years later after that. I started doing flow charts in MS Visio because my boss was a Six Sigma. My boss's boss actually was a Six Sigma. She wanted us to draw the processes, the ITIL processes, incident management, change management, and all those stuff. Apart from writing them as a procedure, we had to develop the flows, the flow charts on Visio that represented them. I got exposed to report writing, and eventually I became service desk supervisor between 2000 and I joined them in about 2007, and 2009 I was a supervisor when Airtel decided to outsource the IT infrastructure to a company called ITS, Integrated Turnkey Solutions. So I started by talking about the choice between Airtel and NLNG. On the second day of work in Airtel, I got a call from NLNG that for the final stage of my interview, it was this session they do where you have to do some group work. I've forgotten what they call it. And I had to tell them that I just started the second. Till today, I don't know whether that was a good choice. And many people say it wasn't a good choice to make. Maybe you would have gone for the money or whatever else. But that was what I said at that time. I told them I wasn't my second day of work. I couldn't attend the interview. So that's a story for another day. Through my stay in service desk, we had 2 fires at Oyinjolayemi, because our building our office was on top of, I think it was Tasty Fried Chicken, something like a restaurant. And in those 2 fires, why it's important is that our BCP procedure actually worked. we knew what to do. We had our procedures printed and in a bag. We had the laptop. Typically, we work with desktop. We had a mobile phone. So in the outbreak of those fires, we could actually execute all those procedures we had written. So that's why we are confined. I don't know. We have to use upon entry or something. We were confined in a room where we really bonded. There were 5 of us in that room with my supervisor. Her name was Yemi Ezebube. And we really bonded in that room, built relationships, learned what it meant to answer calls, to do first call resolution, to escalate issues, and so forth. And those relationships built so much that when I launched my first book, which wasn't an IT book, I could get a lot of audience from that environment, even though I was a contract staff. So relationships are critically important in that career growth. The eventual outcome of your career is an aggregation of your technical and non-technical skills. If you find yourself branching off into something but you particularly don't like, maintain a great attitude and make the best of it. I moved from a core hands-on techie network kind of role to a role where I had to pick calls, a role where I had to write documentation, a role where I had to draw diagrams, flow charts, a role where I had to relate with people rather than computers. And that was a shift for me. It may not be as difficult for some other person, but it was a shift for me, which I had to adjust to in order to add that aspect to my career. On after a while, I was supervising 9 people who came from the call center. It was difficult for me. I had not matured my management skills at that time. So it was very difficult for me. Sometimes they were difficult to deal with. And I began to think that I did better with machines than with humans. So I started looking for a role in application support, spoke to the manager, then spoke to my supervisor, and I wanted to move from my role as supervisor service desk to an application support person back in, that was 2009, thereabout. And one of the things I remember in that experience is that one of the senior managers who came with ITS is an Arab company. He said in his characteristic Arab accent, he said, "Kenneth, I didn't know you had experience with application support. I thought my experience was majorly service desk." There were other comments, at different points in my career during that period. And that was the period I actually joined Covenant Christian Center, like we used to call it before, which is now called the Covenant Nation. And one of the things I learned from Pastor Poju was the concept of the reward of the inheritance, which means whatever you do it as unto the Lord and not unto men. For from the Lord you receive the reward of the inheritance, which implies that which God wants to allocate to you personally. And I did my work as if, I was committed to my work. One of those days, 7 p.m., I was still at work and somebody came and told me, why am I still here? And they had promoted other people, they hadn't promoted me, all those, sentiments that he had. I had another comment when I was studying for SQL Server around the same period when I had embraced the role of an application support person. And I told the guy I was studying SQL Server, and I said, why not Oracle? Oracle was more lucrative, it was more popular, and so forth. But I believe I was inspired to study SQL Server. Nobody was doing it. I found it like a niche I could focus on, and everybody had left it to do other things. And I felt I could distinguish myself by focusing on this specific technology, and that's what I was doing. The point of these 3 statements was that sometimes people doubt you. People wonder, can you do this? The real issue is not whether people are doubtful about what you're capable of. The real issue is whether you are doubtful. If you're not doubtful, then you can take the bull by the horn and push yourself hard enough to get into an area that you're typically unfamiliar with. During that period as application support person, I got it because in Airtel at that time, the DBAs, the core database administrators, were focused on Oracle. So our team had been split from that bigger DB team, and we were focused on applications. But part of our portfolio was Microsoft SQL Server, and that Microsoft SQL Server, just a few small applications, plus SharePoint. So I was like, I had my hands full simply learning a lot from that environment, but using the UAT, doing a few little things. I learned lock shipping. I learned a little bit about address windowing extensions. And particularly, I began to manage a system called BMC Remedy AR system, which was the IT service management tool that we're using. We're also using it for the call center. So in using it for the call center, sometimes I had the opportunity to build forms for them on BMC Remedy Administrator. I once got into some kind of a tussle with the vendor because the vendor felt I was taking away their job. And that was another aspect, another story for another day. So I was exposed to these things and I had to push myself. Once somebody asked me, do you consider yourself an expert in Remedy? I had to push myself at that young age to say, look, I'm taking this up, I'm taking Remedy up, I'm taking SQL Server up, and I'm going to learn this. I'm going to learn by doing, I'm going to deliver on the job. So again, learning by doing, again, staying positive, having the attitude of doing the work and learning as you are doing it. That was all playing out there. From then on, because I had been studying SQL, someone wanted a SQL Server administrator in Accra. And he made a call. He made a call to one of our bosses on sometime in 2011. I remember before now, I said I had been inspired to study SQL. I had certified, done one certification. I was now in progress of doing another one. And he made the call. Then Bisola is the name of the guy who he called. He came down to the fourth floor. He asked, the fourth floor was more like the techies floor. And he asked, who knows SQL Server here? Yinka on the other side of the hall just pointed in my direction because almost everybody knew I had been struggling with that technology. And from that simple connection, so to speak, I did 3 interviews while in Lagos. This was 2011. I did 3 interviews over the phone and I got the opportunity to come to Accra in January 2012 as a SQL Server database administrator. I had something I had prepared for, something I was growing in, something I had been inspired to do. And that is how I became a DBA. From then on, I had to now learn Oracle, essentially, during my stay there. And I had to distinguish myself by things I had learned before. For example, I changed the performance of the Postilion stack. The Postilion is the group switch that manages ATM and that processes ATM transactions, and completely changed the performance of that environment using address windowing extension. The story is online. Now, learns a few other things. And the beautiful thing about working with eProcess in Accra was that I was the only person responsible for SQL Server. So I could experiment, I could do a lot of things, I could try things out, I could study, and I had the attitude to grow that way. And it was a very awesome experience. Up till today, people still think of me as a DBA. So every challenge you take up, every problem you solve has to experience. If you are dodging work, so to speak, you're probably dodging opportunities to grow. And the most valuable thing you can take from an employer is not the money they give you. It is the experience you get from the place. So actively prepare for and pursue opportunities that align with your vision and your capabilities. When you have that opportunity, simply make the best of it and you can move to the next level with it. Finally, on my growth, my growth path, well, I'm currently in 2019, after about 7 years of being a DBA, I became an enterprise architect. And what that meant was the leader of the team in my environment thought that I was good enough. I had a broader sense of thinking. I had been doing my architecting myself, so to speak, for SQL. Like I said, there was nobody supporting, nobody to escalate to. I had to do everything myself. So I had to learn a lot of skills in documenting, drawing, and so forth. So he felt I could do the job and he started speaking to me about it. And in speaking to me about it, at some point, I began to contemplate the possibility of moving into that space. Then something happened. I made a mistake during one of my jobs as a DBA. And I can tell you today that if I hadn't made that mistake, probably I wouldn't have the opportunity to make that move. The reason is that when you are the best at what you do, you have a dilemma. When you want to move, your manager does not want you to move, except you're moving out of the organization. And if you're not good at what you do, when you want to move, the receiving manager does not want you to come to their space either. So it's a dilemma. But what orchestrated that my movement was that error I made. And it was an error that was there. So
Yeah, here you're the one with the
so the group CEO, the group CIO rather, spoke for me and said he had been trying to go to EA. So instead of giving him disciplinary action that would taint his career, let him move. And almost everybody thought that that move was like some kind of a punishment, but I made the best of it. I made the best of it and grew the practice to the point that today I lead the team of enterprise architects. So take the best opportunities and move on with them. Today, I'm certified in TOGAF, certified in BIAN, and I'm pursuing other certifications. I probably missed out the story of how I certified in AWS in 2016. Why did I do that certification? I began to see the picture of the future of databases. And I saw that, look, at some point, it's not going to be a very popular job because cloud is taking over, IDS is taking over, and so forth. Back in 2009, if you look at my previous slides, I put an ouch at some locations. Where those I put an ouch, as I had the opportunity to learn Linux in 2003, thereabout. That was my first exposure to Linux. Somehow I just let it go. And in 2010, thereabout, one of my colleagues, Victor Edger, he was managing the VMware environment. He was teaching us a few things. And he said that VMware is the future, cloud is the future. It sounded very hazy at that time to me. And I say to myself, those are some of the things you need to pick up along your career. Someone mentioned something that is emerging, and that is your opportunity to take it up and say, look, let me study this. Let me prepare for this future that is arriving. Someone mentioned something that doesn't look like it's very popular right now. That's probably your opportunity to get into that space and understand what's going on there and prepare for that future. All right, what are the key takeaways before I wrap up? One of the things is, if you are still young enough, or if you're starting again, you may want to start with a life plan and ask yourself, how do I want to chart my course in my career? And there are a few elements here around building that life plan, which I will not delve into too deeply. I'll talk about some of those elements of life plan in my non-IT book, If I Were to Live Again. Then the concept of having the intersection as you're making your choice of your next move between your training, the reward associated with that career, and the demand for those set of skills, the TDR intersection. I talk about this in my course, Career Growth Strategies in Information Technology. And I've talked a lot about relationships in this through these slides. The contacts I've had, most of my jumps, so to speak, have been because I knew somebody who knew what I was worth. Respect, engagement, loyalty, attitude, truth, empathy, the RELATE acronym, being able to say, how do I build the right kind of relationships that will give me the opportunities that I'm looking for in the areas of my career. And soft skills, many tech people are too focused on tech. They are not able to balance out and ask themselves, what will I be doing when I'm 45 and up? Sometimes, particularly in a part of the world, when you're 45 and up, nobody's looking for you anymore as the skilled coder. They need you to do something else. And you need to develop a different set of skills to be able to operate at that level, whether it's management, presentation, communication, negotiation, teamwork, and so forth. So as a techie, you need to ask yourself, am I balancing my tech skills with my soft skills? So you need to look beyond technology with a kind of attitude that is relevant, open-mindedness, and so forth, as shown in this career. I talk about a lot of these things in another course, the 3 career growth strategies in information technology. I think we have 3 key strategies that I will not go onto here. So let me stop here and take a few questions, and with respect to both the story and the lessons from the story. Thank you.
Thank you, Kenneth. Thank you so much. That was a very, very enlightening one. I like where you said you fell, not like because I wanted you to fall, but I mean the story from falling and all. And I think this is the second time you're sharing maybe a mistake that happened, and then you got mercy and the favor of your superiors. Thank you for sharing your story, sir. Guys, do we have questions? Do you have questions? Do you have questions? Feel free to unmute because it might take a while to say chat. But if you have a question, just raise your hand, unmute, and then we can take questions. So my first question, let me go as other people ask. So my question would be that there was something you mentioned around, the future of tech, and then you're also transitioning into, or you are getting informed on some other niches and fields in tech, right? Where do you see, I'll say, system admin and all that in a few years? So for instance, people say technology is going to maybe erode or evade some career paths and all, because maybe robots and the likes of artificial intelligence will just be doing it and would have less physical interactions in quote in some fields. So along this chain of your career journey, are there specific fields that you already see that in 10, 15 years may almost be extinct? And then what are your own plans to, mitigate that?
Okay, personally speaking, because of my role is basically to connect the dots among technology process people. So for me, whatever technology it is, I'm no longer so much concerned about what specifically it is, but I should be aware of what technology is emerging. And I'll tell you about a few in the area of infrastructure, which you've asked about. Automation, you mentioned it. Automation, either in terms of automating processes or automating management of infrastructure. The other day, a colleague and I were speaking about Ansible, about Terraform, infrastructure as code. So these are technologies that allow you to deploy, to orchestrate, to basically manage your infrastructure in terms of deploying new servers without taking all the steps that you used to take when you had to sit as an admin and say, click here, type this command. These are technologies that allow you to basically code, to develop, create a script that will do this over and over again, and then deploy the script and say, okay, do this in this data center, do this on this platform, do this in this cloud environment. So automation in terms of infrastructure automation, infrastructure as code, Ansible is there, and there are other capabilities that do that. Then automation in terms of automating processes, RPA, robotic process automation, is the talk of the town now. There's a platform called technology called Blue Prism, which has become very good at that. People are also exploring Power Automate from Microsoft to do a lot of workflow automation, e-signatures like the likes of Adobe. So what those do is change dramatically the way we work, and then reduce the need for human intervention in managing infrastructure. Obviously, everybody already knows that cloud is also reducing significantly the need for human intervention in managing platforms. And in my case, in my background as a DBA, we know that a lot of things we used to do, performance tuning, index optimization, installing and deploying databases over 2, 3, 4 hours is no longer the case, because once you go to AWS, you can click on the RDS console and get your database, optimized database for that matter, in a matter of minutes. So those areas are emerging. How do we now? Someone said that software is eating the world. So before, we had to go through a whole cycle of buying servers, designing, setting up. Right now, it's very easy with cloud, very easy with infrastructure as code, very easy with all kinds of automation that is happening in the world. So those are some of the key areas I can think of now.
Thank you very much, Mr. Kenneth. Okay, so we have another question from Zoe. And Zoe says, awesome life story. Thank you for sharing, sir. Please, what are your thoughts on Web3 and blockchain technology? Do you see it as the future of the web?
It is inevitable. It's inevitable. And I'm not the expert on Web3, but I'll talk a lot about blockchain. What is blockchain going to do for us? First of all, everybody knows about currency, cryptocurrency already. Everybody knows that at some point, whether it's going to be Bitcoin or another coin or some CBN coin or something, We are going to start, people are going to start thinking of decentralized currencies. But more importantly, there are other aspects of blockchain technology that is very serious or intrusive in the way we work. For example, smart contracts. How do lawyers, how do, you used to need lawyers to build a contract between you and between multiple parties, write it with all sorts of language and text. And now you can say, okay, I'm going to put this on technology. I'm going to put this on a platform that will be able to automatically determine the terms of a contract between me and probably a software platform or a SaaS platform that I'm consuming. Then that smart contract, we talk about supply chains. And these days people want to know, okay, this cocoa that is coming from Ghana to Europe, was the farm developed by children? How pure is it? When did it leave Accra and all that? And people can now put tags on the whole chain and be able to determine that what they are buying is what. There's a friend of mine, his name is Shadrach Kubiani. He's doing a lot of work with that in the area of hair extensions. So people will typically leave South Africa, go to China to go and examine hair extensions to determine whether they are actually authentic, and probably spend what, $40,000 doing all that research and validation before doing the import and etc. And you now give them a total a technology, blockchain technology, and IBM that tells them that this, without a shadow of doubt, is authentic and is coming from China. It's coming from this specific person, and this is the name of the person. Maybe that can even be the case. This is the name of the person who donated their hair, etc. And that chain is so tight that it's being called a truth machine, and it saves a lot of money for the person who is making the purchase, because now he has an assurance that is based on what the technology is telling them. And there are other use cases, other interesting use cases, which are evolving, and I think there's no way to circumvent them. Probably the strongest pushbacks is maybe from the established systems like the banks, but eventually I think there will be harmony, a point of meeting of those established authorities and the new decentralized economy. That's what I think. Incidentally, just a few weeks ago, our MD was asking us about ideas on how to put the bank in the metaverse, or how to put up maybe ATMs in the metaverse, maybe ask those who are making money there to bring their money back into fiat, all those things. So people are thinking about those things, yeah.
Thank you so much, Sir Kenneth. Thank you for sharing from your wealth of knowledge. Thank you very much. Hey guys, please unmute your mic and appreciate Sir Kenneth. I'm sure we all learned one or two things.
A question from Victor.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir. We appreciate you.
Bless.
Okay, thanks.
Some of you did not have some of you did not ask questions now.
No, there's a question on the chat. So for me, there's a
Yeah.
question on the chat.
We've asked that.
No.
Okay. Oh,
We are not
sorry.
looking at
There's
the
another
chat.
question. This
The
one just
question
came in.
then.
Oh, sorry. I missed that. I think it just came in. Okay.
Okay, Victor
We
says,
have one.
yes, is it possible to know SQL totally?
Yes, to know SQL totally, or sorry, as you have been, or how can one be well at this, please? Knowing fully well that with SQL scripting, lots can be resolved.
Okay, yes, thank you for that. And now the truth is that this question, you can ask it about any technology or any kind of knowledge. Is it possible to know anything totally? And I don't think it's possible to do anything totally, because as you're learning, it's evolving. As you're learning the technology, as you're learning SQL, and when you say SQL now, structured query language, the language itself, and you probably already know that there are different variants of SQL. For example, there's the SQL ANSI standard, SQL 92, SQL 2000, if I remember correctly. There's the SQL that as implemented by Oracle, who added pSQL to it, which is procedural SQL. There's the SQL that's called Transact SQL, which is implemented in SQL Server, Microsoft, and so forth. So it's both vast and deep. And while it's important for you to know the basics, the 16 commands, select, update, and that form the language, by the time you start going deeper, you now start asking yourself about performance tuning. You start asking yourself about thinking like the engine, like Brent Oza used to say, or thinking in terms of that SQL is not a procedural language, it is a set-based language. I mean, there's so much to it. So the more you learn, the more you discover what you don't know. And I don't think it's actually possible to finish learning, so to speak. But one of the attitudes you have to develop is what you know today, don't rest on your oars. Don't say, I'm so good at this. And always think beyond your own organization. Think beyond your nation. Ask yourself, if I'm going to sit with somebody from the US on this subject, how will I perform, and so forth. So it's always evolving, and we need to always learn.
Thank you so much, Sir Kenneth. Thank you so much,
Most
sir.
welcome. Most welcome. Yeah.
Do we have any other question, please? All right, so I believe our questions have been answered. So we're moving to the next speaker. And okay, I'll let Omobowale introduce the next speaker. Thank you. Hi, Omobowale.